It's my pleasure to reintroduce Karol Mason, the head of the Office of Justice Programs. You had a chance to meet her yesterday, and we are absolutely thrilled that she's going to be kicking off our panel this morning. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Are you there?
Yes.
So I hope you know how important you are to me. That's why I'm back here and excited that you invited me back, and I'm not sure. I don't know if I got a clap, so I don't know whether you have faith in what I'm going to do today or not, but hopefully you have faith in the people who are going to be presenting. So it is my pleasure to open the next panel, and these are folks that I've worked closely with and we will continue to work closely with, and I'm so excited about what you're going to hear from them today. And you'll see me always carrying a notebook and scribbling, because these are opportunities for me to continue to learn and to learn how we can be better partners with you all. So we are going to be talking with these remarkable people about our nation's they've been our leaders in the reentry efforts. So as part of our work on the Federal Interagency Reentry Council, we formed close partnerships with a number of organizations and individuals who've given us a vital perspective on reentry. We spent a lot of time listening to and learning from those who have either experienced the hardships of reentry or work closely with those who have. These folks know firsthand what it's like to return or help people returning to their communities after an experience with our justice system. 2 weeks ago, the staff team for the Reentry Council, led by my Director of Policy, Amy Solomon, who, she hates it when I say this, but she's our General Eisenhower, attended our third regional listening session in New York, organized by College and Community Fellowship and JustLeadershipUSA, to hear from formerly incarcerated individuals about their ongoing challenges. Now, I need to make sure you understand that was our third regional meeting, but it was not our third meeting. We've been meeting and talking and working with these people, wonderful, wonderful leaders for a long time, and I'm proud to call them my friends, and I will introduce them shortly. But I attended the session in Oakland organized by All of Us or None, and these listening sessions have been incredibly, incredibly valuable for us. They've given us new insights and encouraged us and our federal partners to take several groundbreaking steps. For instance, we've instituted the Ban the Box policies. We're reducing barriers to housing for returning citizens, and we've just heard from Deputy Secretary King that we've waived the ban on Pell Grant eligibility for a number of incarcerated individuals. And when he said it was because of advocacy, he meant the folks sitting on the stage. And on many of you out there, your voices count, your voices matter, your voices change things. So across the board, we're working to break down structural barriers so that everyone has a chance to succeed. Our panelists this morning have been intimately involved in our efforts to move the nation's reentry policies and practices forward, and they're four of the leading voices in our country on reentry, violence reduction, and fair treatment for our justice system. Our first panelist, Glenn Martin. Glenn is the founder of JustLeadershipUSA, which is dedicated to cutting the correctional population in half by 2030. Glenn spent 6 years in New York State prisons, and he used his experience to drive policy reform by empowering those most affected by incarceration. As Glenn often says, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and we firmly believe that, which is why we listen so closely to them. Our second panelist is Vivian Nixon. Reverend Nixon, okay, I know you're out of order, but is executive director, so she's our third one, is executive director of College and Community Fellowship, which works to remove individual and structural barriers to higher education for women with criminal records and their families. She draws her insights and motivation from her time serving as a peer educator at Albion State Correctional Facility in New York. Along with Glenn and his organization, Vivian also co-founded Education from the Inside Out Coalition, which seeks greater access to higher education for justice-involved students. Our second panelist, got it right this time, is Daryl Atkinson. Daryl served 40 months for a first-time nonviolent drug offense and faced a number of hurdles when he returned home from prison. But he overcame these obstacles and is now a senior staff attorney for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, where he focuses on criminal justice reform issues, particularly removing legal barriers triggered by the justice system contact. I'm also pleased to make sure that you all know that beginning in January, he's going to be a Justice Department fellow, our second chance fellow at the United States Department of Justice. We take this work very seriously. He will be our colleague on the Reentry Council and a valuable advisor to the Office of Justice Programs and the Bureau of Justice Assistance's Second Chance programs in particular. He will gather additional input directly from others, so he's not just his voice, he's representing all voices, and I can assure you that he will be contacting all of you all to get your perspectives. And to close things out, we're glad to have Michael Walker, who is very energetic and passionate about this issue. Michael is Executive Director of Partnership for a Safer Cleveland, which directs programs designed to prevent and reduce violence in the Cleveland area. He also oversees a comprehensive anti-violence initiatives with our friends in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I'm delighted to welcome all of our panelists here, all of our leaders in this work, and that you are now going to hear from each of them. So why don't we start with you, Glenn?
Thank you. Good morning. I thought I was coming here to do a workshop. Clearly, that's not the case. Good morning. So first of all, thank you to Deputy Secretary John King for his kind words, Congressman Danny Davis, who's been doing this since, when reentry was a word on a door on a staircase, right? Like, Congressman Danny Davis has been a champion on this issue for so long, and Assistant Attorney General Karol Mason for having your actions match your rhetoric. You were the honoree for this year's benefit at Just Leadership USA, and we gave you that honor because you and your colleagues have been so true to what we believe in, that people closest to the problem are closest to the solution, and you guys have created a meaningful space for dialogue from the very people most impacted, so I'm hugely appreciative. So talking to the people in this audience, I was asking myself, today's presentation for me is not going to be my typical sort of 10,000 feet up presentation. I'm going to actually be pretty granular, and I think you'll see a progression as we talk towards the big picture. The first thing I'll say is that your measure of success in service provision to people who are most affected by these issues has nothing to do with the size of your budget, the number of people that you're serving, the number of people that are following you on your social media, although I am on Twitter at Glenn E. Martin. It has to do with your commitment to your constituents, your clients, the people who walk through the door, and more broadly to the communities that have been significantly impacted by mass incarceration, over policing, you name it. And so it means that you have a responsibility as providers to recognize that, and as you walk away from these folks, that you have built not just their capacity to lead, but their ability to go back to their own communities and be leaders. My journey in the reentry space, I left prison 15 years ago. I was saddled with almost $100,000 in debt, fines, fees, restitution, child support, and landed at a reentry organization, a nonprofit public interest law firm in New York City, sitting at the front desk, making $17,000 a year. But it was a place where people believed in me and saw it as more than just, it was a great opportunity, but it wasn't doing me a favor. And so I want to be clear about that, as I think the government's been clear about the fact that they value the hiring of people who are formerly incarcerated as part of your work, but you have to do that in a really meaningful way. I built Just Leadership USA in direct response to what I was hearing from my colleagues in the field about their efforts to bring formerly incarcerated people into leadership within their organization. And so what does that mean? First of all, I think that the nonprofit field in general hasn't done a great job of building a second bench of leadership, and I think that we need to work on that just as a sector, but reentry organizations in particular, I think have a responsibility to be thinking about second bench of leadership, like who's going to rise up into the leadership positions in your organizations. If this country has invested, I think we're up to $475 million in second chance resources, we need to be able to look back eventually and say, we didn't just run organizations, we didn't just provide services, but we built the capacity of these communities to support themselves. Because the truth is, in the end, when I was at the Fortune Society, which was my second job out of prison as vice president, one of the largest and longest standing reentry organizations in the country, I would talk to clients who were successful, and I would say to them, you know, what is it that made you successful? And as you guys know, anyone who's been doing this work long enough, people don't say, oh, you know, it was that your analysis really worked for me, turned my life around. Right? What they would say is, you know, Glenn, it was Vilma sitting at the front desk, the receptionist. When I walked in, she said, welcome home. And no one had ever said that to me before. And we all know as human beings that it's that sort of human stuff, the glue in between the grants, the glue in between the program, that really is the stuff that turns people's lives around. For me, it was a correction counselor in prison 20 years ago that looked at my grades and said, you should go to college. Happened to be the first time anyone had ever said that to me. And that person who planted that seed probably had no clue how that seed would ultimately grow. But that's the work you guys are doing every single day. Every touch point you have, whether it's with a client or someone you hire to work with you so that you can have the cultural competency it takes to do this work, and that you can build the leadership of people to move up into management positions. Like those touch points, you never know where they're going to lead, but you should understand that they all have value in one way or the other. I think Congressman Danny Davis told a starfish story, which I'm going to borrow. So how do you do that? So you have to think about things like your application process. What does your application look like? Is it explicit about who it is that you're interested in hiring? I know at Just Leadership, I mean, we're only a year old. We have 6 people on staff. 4 of them are formerly incarcerated. 2 of them are folks who've gone through our leadership training. We're very deliberate about telling the world who it is that we're looking for, and that if you're qualified, right? You have to be qualified. We're not just hiring people solely because they're formerly incarcerated, because that can actually be a disservice to the people that you're hiring. But we're looking for qualified people, and if they're formerly incarcerated, we see that as something of value in our organization. I think you have to be explicit about it. I think you have to think about your credentialing that you're asking for in your application. If you're asking for college degrees and you're not creating a space for people to bring their experiential knowledge to the table, then you're barring people. It creates a chilling effect if your application is focused on credentialing. You have to ask yourself, where are you sourcing people from? It sounds like soon we'll have more and more college programs around the country turning out people who are exiting prison that have a level of skills that you'll be looking for. You might want to think about connecting with some of these programs. And then your benefits, your health insurance, your retirement and so on, don't make assumptions. I mean, in some ways, you're dealing with people who've been taught their whole lives that they have no future. So don't be surprised when they don't buy into the life insurance, or when they're not using their own health coverage, or they're not putting into their retirement. But you have to build that into your structure. You have to recognize that you're hiring people that may have a set of skills that are valuable to you. They have an experience that's valuable to you, but there's some other stuff that you may have learned throughout your life, throughout your work experience, that they may not bring to the table. And if your commitment is to making sure that you bring folks into the work, then every time you sit down and do your budget at the end of the year, you need to build resources into your budget to help build their capacity to get up to speed. Recognize the value they bring to the table, but invest in whatever else you think you might need out of folks. So I see my time is up, so I'll stop, and hopefully I'll get to share more in the back and forth afterwards. Thank you.
So I think we talked about me going next, so it's fine. I'm good with that. Hi, everyone. I'm Vivian Nixon, and I am the Executive Director of College and Community Fellowship. I want to echo Glenn's sentiments in thanking CSG for inviting us to this conference, and certainly appreciate the very powerful words from Deputy Secretary John King, from Congressman Davis, and of course from our own Assistant Attorney General, Karol Mason, who has been a fabulous partner in all of the work that we've done over the last couple of years. So I found myself sitting here listening to all of the previous remarks and kind of feeling like this is a surreal moment and almost in a dreamlike state, remembering a time 15 years ago when I was released from prison and came to college and community fellowship as a college student wanting to earn my degree. And through that process, wanting to actually be a part of the organization in a more formal way, coming to work for the organization, and then realizing that while we were a very small organization making powerful changes in women's lives, that there was more, that there were thousands of other women and millions of other people currently incarcerated who don't have access to education. And having that critical shift in the work that we do to expand it to include working on public policy issues that would give more people access to college. And then arriving at this moment, to be on this stage and to hear the Secretary, Assistant Secretary of the Department of Education say out loud that we have lifted the ban on Pell Grants for some incarcerated people. That's a long journey.
Absolutely. Yes, yes.
And it's one that's very dear to my heart because I did not have an opportunity to go to college while I was incarcerated. But thankfully, college and community fellowship was there for me when I got out to help me make that journey to college and to graduation. I want to talk today about our Second Chance Grant. We are very proud and happy Second Chance grantees. And that was also a long journey. From being a small organization to figuring out how to manage the federal grants process. Our program is different, and I think that's why it kind of took a while for our application to catch the attention of folks who really make decisions. We're doing a mentoring program inside of women's correctional facilities in New York State, but that mentoring process is focused on helping people navigate the college application process and complete college degrees. And to my knowledge, that's the first time a Second Chance mentoring grant has focused on that solely. And so we're very proud of that work. There are challenges in doing this work. I know all of the grantees in the room who are working with departments of corrections across the country understand that it's challenging, but it is also extremely rewarding. I want to talk about why we chose to focus solely on education at college and community fellowship. The impact that higher education has on an individual's life has been articulated really well this morning by John King. But the reason we do it, it kind of spans several areas, and one is the values that we hold as Americans. We believe in opportunity for all Americans, and in a country where 44% of Americans are income insecure, and what that means is that they would not be able to survive at the poverty level for 3 months if they lost their jobs. In a situation where half of us are income insecure, we can't afford to have another group of people locked out of the economic system by not having access to good, high-quality jobs. Major portion of people who enter the criminal justice system are making less than $12,000 a year when they enter. That's below the poverty level. So we really have to consider the economic benefit of providing people with access to education that's going to get them good, high-quality jobs. But that's not the only reason. You know, we talk about the school-to-prison pipeline as if it's only a preventative front-end issue, but it's also a back-end issue, because many of the people who are languishing in prisons already, who are adults, who have been in prison for years, also were part of the school-to-prison pipeline before it had a name, and they deserve opportunity as well. That's part of our value system. We value all people. And then another thing I want to talk about is the opportunity to change not just the lives of a person by them getting a college degree, but to change the trajectory of their entire family. We see that all the time at college and community fellowship. The women we work with have children who are watching them become students. We just issued a report about the social capital that is building in the community of people who have college degrees and are raising children. And then finally, the leadership component that Glenn just talked about. It is one thing to provide services to people and to give charity to people who are in need. We need that work to be done. So many people are in need, so many people need services. But what changes communities and what has the potential to impact our society in a more meaningful, deeply lasting way that creates justice across the board for those who have been locked out and marginalized for centuries is the development of leadership within those communities. And education is a pathway to leadership. Developing leadership provides role models for others who are coming through the system. We hear all the time, oh, when you're doing college programs for incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people, you're kind of creaming from the top and you're only serving an elite group of folks. That is just not true. Because when you build leadership, you are serving everybody who's coming along that pipeline because they get to see a real life example of what can be done if only they take advantage of whatever opportunities are being presented. I want to encourage all of you, when you're serving the population of people coming out of prison, to raise the bar as high as you possibly can with the resources you have, because formerly incarcerated people should not be relegated to subsistence living where they're just barely surviving. That is not a real second chance. A real second chance is not just a second chance to be free or to have a job, but it's a second chance to live your dreams. Thank you.
How y'all doing out there? All right, I'm gonna try this once again and give you a little bit of context. I'm a deacon in my church. I come from a African-American faith tradition. When we give a call, we expect a response. How y'all doing out there?
All right.
Good, good, good. That's much better. If I can entitle my talk, it would be entitled Transactional Change versus Transformational Change. How do we make sure that the policies and the practices and the cognitive behavioral therapy works in service of ushering in a broader cultural shift in the way that we look at people with criminal records and their ability to participate in our society? When I look at my own reentry trajectory, it takes me back to November the 4th, 1999. My mother and stepfather came and picked me up from St. Clair Correctional Facility. It was one of 3 level 5 institutions in the state of Alabama. St. Clair Correctional Facility, 60% of their population had life without parole. You would ask the men there how much time they had, and they would say all of it, because they were never coming home. The story behind how I got there with a 10-year sentence with a mandatory minimum of 40 months to serve on that 10-year sentence is a story of failed correctional policy that I won't get into today. That's a story for another panel. But when my mother and stepfather came and picked me up, they rented a Lincoln Town Car. Now, mind you, both of them had operating vehicles, and it didn't strike me at that particular point of why they did that, but I reflected maybe about 2 years later, and I asked my stepdad, why did you all do that? Why did you all rent a vehicle when both of you all had cars that you could have driven to come and pick me up? And they said, we wanted you to leave that place in style. And it reminded me of a biblical story, and you all got to forgive me. I use these analogies when I talk about this particular problem. It reminded me the story of the prodigal son. And folks who might have not been regular Sunday school attendees, let me remind you of what that story was about. So you had this young guy who gets an advancement on his inheritance. He goes out and wildly lives, probably came in contact with their legal system at some point, spent up all of his advancement, ended up eating slop with the pigs, come back to his senses, and goes back home. And his father received him with open arms, gave him a ring, gave him a robe of many colors, slaughtered the fatted calf, and welcomed him back. Imagine if we did that and had that kind of mentality and value system with the 650,000 people that are released from state and federal correctional facilities every year. Because they're part of our American family. They're somebody's father. They're 45% of the people who go into prison are living in the home with their children. They're somebody's brother. They're somebody's mother. They are part of our American family. And we should welcome them home with open arms. So how do we do this? I got 3 ideas. Number one, the laws and the policies that we change, they cannot be divorced from the historical context that brought them into being. So for example, felon disenfranchisement, I'm intimately affected by that particular issue. The lack of the ability to cast a ballot because you've been convicted of a felony conviction. I got law licenses in 2 different states, in North Carolina and Minnesota, but if I move back to the state of my birth, I can't vote in Alabama because I've been convicted of a crime that they designated as a crime of moral turpitude. So those laws need to be reformed, but it takes more. We have to understand the historical and social context that brought those laws into existence in the first place. So in North Carolina, our first felon disenfranchisement law was enacted in 1876. We passed that law as a direct result to radical Reconstruction, which ushered in the election of over 600 African American officials all throughout the South. That provided us with some of our most progressive public policies. For example, public education. And in response to that electoral power, the Old South had a redemption period and they started enacting felon disenfranchisement laws and enacting black codes and criminalizing black behavior to dilute that political power. We need to reform those laws, but understanding the historical context that brought them into being in the first place. Number 2. Be conscious of the images, the language that you use in your publications, in your websites, how you refer to people. Because see, I'm not an ex-convict. I'm not an ex-felon. I'm not an ex-offender. I'm not the sum total of my contact with the criminal justice system. So what you want us to call you, Daryl? I'm so glad you asked. How about people? People who've been to prison, people in jail, people formerly incarcerated. But the operative word is people because it affirms their humanity and sees them as whole people. Number 3, and this is going to touch on a point that both Glenn and Vivian have made previously. Amplify the leadership of the people who are most directly impacted by the problem. Michelle Alexander wrote a book, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Colorblindness, calling it the new Jim Crow. And one of the major takeaways from that particular book is that in any mass movement, the people most directly impacted have to be in leadership, and nothing short of a mass movement is going to see us out of this problem. So that means that the leadership has to come from people with records. When you look at the women's suffrage movement, the LGBTQ movement, the civil rights movement, the leaders were the people who were most intimately affected by that particular form of oppression. The same is true today. What does this mean if we get this right in this country, y'all? It means the implications are that we can maintain our economic hegemony. So for example, America has the largest economy in the world. And I think we would want to stay that way. But the boomer generation is aging out of the workforce. I see a few boomers in the audience. I see some gray hair. And what are we going to do to replace that workforce while at the same time we're undergoing these huge demographic shifts where our country is getting browner? We're going to be a majority country very, very soon by 2040, 2050. If those folks, black and brown people, poor white folks, because of disproportionate contact with the criminal justice system and the second-class status that comes with that, if they're not able to attain education, human capital, who's going to replace that workforce? That impacts all of us. That impacts our standing as a country. Lastly, This is an opportunity for us to align ourselves with our highest aspirational values as a country. All men and women are created equal. Opportunity exists for everyone. America is a land of second chances. If we truly believe that rhetoric, our policies, our practices, the way that we get down with one another has to reflect that rhetoric. So what I'm going to implore you to do is to be bolder, to be braver, to continue to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice, and let's change the world.
Good morning. Being a closer is a great place to be. I really can't screw up. I mean, because the people before me have really set the table. All you have to do is eat, people. So one of the things I was asked to do is do a TED Talk. I don't even know a TED, but I do know a Sally Bailey. And Sally Bailey was my grandmother, who did not even go to school, from Anniston, Alabama. So it's interesting that we have some native sons talking about this issue. She said to me, Michael, whenever you talk to people, follow 3 B's. Be brief, be bright, and be gone. I am going to close in about 5 minutes. And it's really simple. My grandmother said, whatever you do in your life, be a bridge builder. And I'm like, an engineer? A carpenter? What? A masonry? What? She says, build bridges. You've heard everyone here talk about education, economic empowerment, the ability to find dignity in our people. You are the bridge builders. If you don't get anything from this conversation, understand that it's the person that you are that changes systems. But you also are the network. No one should leave depressed about our job. The notion of faith. Look around this room. Look at the diversity in this room. She fought tears, and I wanted to give her a big hug. I wanted to go over there and hug my brother, and then Karol's my girl. So, and she doesn't know I know Bessie Griffin, who's really my girl. And I'm talking about these people inspire. The congressman that spoke, his mentor was one of my best friends, Congressman Louis Stokes. He did not even know that till today. Just 3 seconds of acknowledgement can change and build bridges. Your job, your task, is to keep doing what you're doing and personalize it. The 3 things that were discussed about what you could do, the change, is personalize. It's your network. It's our network because it's our people. Finally, I'll close this by saying, I wanted to kind of figure out why we want to separate and segregate so many things. The notion of credentialing and having a box. Because are we trying to separate because we want to be better than others? My grandmother said, and I say it again, be a bridge builder. Thank you very much.
So I know we got started late, so I don't think we have a chance for the interchange we would like to have, but I do hope that you come away as inspired, energized, and ready to roll up your sleeves and just continuing to push through like I am. Because if you aren't inspired and ready to go out, run out of this door to do some more work, then get the tape and play it again. And I'm looking for the people at CSG because I want the tape from all of this. And I am fighting back tears because I am so happy that this is our moment. This is your moment. Take it. Take it. As they said, be bold, and we can change this world. You already are, and so let's keep doing it. Go to your breakout sessions, learn what you need to learn, because we're going to be watching you and learning from you and figuring out how we can partner with you to really change this world for the better for everyone. So thank you very much for your commitment to being here today.